Good morning, afternoon, evening to everybody. I hope you are looking forward to this workshop. So what we're going to be covering today is the fast and easy way into Jamstack with Gatsby and Kontent. So the aim for today will be to create a simple landing page that is powered by Kontent using Gatsby. And joining me with this as well, just to help field any questions and kind of jump in as we go, is Matt Neild, who is a Kontent MVP. So if you just want to introduce yourself, Matt, if you feel so.
I mean, I think you've done the job there, yeah. So I'm Kontent by Kentico MVP, and I'll just be helping Rich out today, so fielding any questions and keeping track on things. I'll mostly be quiet, so over to you, Rich.
Cool. So just first off, just a little bit of intro on myself as well. So I am Richard Shackleton. I'm the UI architect at NetConstruct, a digital agency in the UK. And if you want to follow me on Twitter for the occasional tech tweet and probably more gaming and wrestling tweets, to be honest, primarily retweets. It's not really that worth, but yeah, if you feel like you can follow me there. But without further ado, let's just get on with what everybody wants to see here, which is some code, let's be honest. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to get started with the Gatsby minimal starter. So I'm just going to open up the terminal window we've got here, and we're going to run the Gatsby new command. And what this will do is it will bring up a wizard for creating a new Gatsby project. So for the sake of this, we'll quickly do sort of Gatsby Conf 2022. And then it's going to give you a prompt for the name of the folder that you want to create that in. So we'll just go with the default there. I'm personally a TypeScript person, so I'm going to go with the TypeScript starter, but everything we're covering today could quite easily be done with plain JavaScript as well. So I'm going to choose the TypeScript option there. Plus, with all of the new TypeScript updates in 4.8 and 4.9, it'd probably be a little bit rude not to go with that, let's be honest. So next up, for now, we're going to go with no, I'll add it later in terms of the CMS. We're going to do this manually just so we can show you how that works. My preference for the styling system will be emotion, but that could be whichever your preferences would be. And then finally, it also prompts us to add a few base plugins. And these ones are the ones I'd recommend at an absolute minimum for any project of any kind of real size, because they're just very, very valuable. So first off, responsive images. If you're going to have images on the site, you want to make sure that you have the opportunity to optimize those for different devices. So turn that one on. You'll want to also enable meta tags via React Helmet. So this will allow you to control the page metadata using React Helmet. And again, we can use that via Kontent to give control to any editors so they could change the metadata of the page. Another useful one to have in there is an automatic sitemap. So I would suggest enabling that version as well to include the sitemap plugin. And then finally, this one is still probably worth including. It's not quite as important if you're not going with a full PWA, but you may as well also include a manifest file. So we'll choose those, and then we'll just go down to done and hit enter again. And then it just gives you a quick summary about what you've chosen. So you can give a quick glance over that and check everything's right. And if you're happy with it, just hit enter again. It defaults to yes, and it'll go through and create a new Gatsby project. So we'll just let that run through for the time being. So it should only take a few minutes. I mean, it's a yarn install, so yeah, it's going to take a few minutes anyway.
Are they quite easy to add in later if you change your mind, Rich?
Absolutely, yeah. So any of the plugins that are listed in there are easily added via the Gatsby Plugins search area of the Gatsby website. So I'd suggest if we open up this, I can do this right now actually. I've already got the source plugin I'll be using in here, but if you go to the Gatsby website, if you go to open source and then to Gatsby plugins, this will bring up the top level plugin library, and then you can go in here and you can just browse for any plugins that you want to include. So if, for example, you wanted to include the sitemap one, you can search for sitemap, you can grab the plugin and follow the documentation to add it and set it up. But yeah, if you're going to be starting a new project, that the wizard options just give you that little bit of a head start on that one. So we'll see how that's getting on. So we'll still go in there a little bit.
Someone's also just asked, Rich, can you make your terminal a bit bigger at all?
Ah, yes. How's about that?
That looks better to me. So hopefully that's good.
Perfect. So the next thing we're going to do is just going to open up the new project folder that we've created in Visual Studio Code. So we've got that here, and you can see on the right hand side, hopefully if I zoom in a little bit, it'll make that bigger. But okay, but maybe not. On the right side, you can see we've got the file tree here for the project that's been set up. So the first thing I'm going to quickly do here is just add prettier, purely for the sake of formatting things as we go along, so everything is a little bit tidier. I'm just going to add that in, and I'm just going to drag in this prettier file as well. That'll just let us format things as we go along. So once you've got the project created, you've opened it in your editor, you can run yarn develop, and that will launch Gatsby in a new window. So I don't think it launches it automatically by default in the configuration. You can enable that as an option in the develop command. I believe it will just start the server by default. So we'll just let that run. Absolutely. Thanks for answering that question in the chat there. Yeah, if you're looking for information on how to set up a Gatsby project by default, you're going to need to install the Gatsby CLI, which I did not cover at the very, very beginning. Probably should have covered that. If you go to the Gatsby documentation again, open source documentation, and if you go on to quick start, this will show you a few ways of getting started with a new project. So npm init Gatsby, I believe, runs the same wizard as running through Gatsby new. But you can also install the CLI with npm or yarn. You can install it globally as Gatsby-CLI, which will get you access to those commands that I ran as well. So we are now running the project here, and it automatically runs at port 8000. So we'll just go in and load up our localhost 8000, and we've got our fresh Gatsby page. And the other thing we've got access to in here as well is the graphical interface. And this gives you an overview of all of the data that's within the Gatsby GraphQL schema as well, which we'll get to momentarily. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to have a quick conversation around environment variables and configuration. So one of the things that you will often find yourself needing to do when it comes to configuring Gatsby is you'll have your Gatsby config file, which by default we can see has included the plugins that we installed as part of the wizard here. So if we go down, and if we wanted to add a new plugin into here, we would add our code in there, and then we can pass in any parameters as options, as you can see with the Gatsby source file system plugin there. Anything that you would want to be configured per project, the presentation quality would make the text nearly unreadable unless it's large and in high contrast. Is this readable at the moment? If you could confirm, that would be useful. I think the broadcast should be.
I'd say that's probably still a bit small. If you can make it a bit bigger, Rich.
No problem.
And the browser was, I think, rinky-dink would be a good word.
yeah, I think the browser isn't really zoomed in, but hopefully that's large enough for the time being. I'll get started. I'll carry on for now. Yes, I'm seeing yeses. That's good. Brilliant. So again, if we're adding a new plugin into here, if you're bringing any configuration, if any of that is needs to be protected or is potentially sensitive information, then you're going to want to include that in environment variables. So in order to do that, we can go to the environment variables page on the Gatsby documentation. So in here, I've just gone to the documentation page and I've just searched for environment variables in here. And this will give you a quick intro into the specifics, but what we really need to know here is .env.development is the file that we want to use. And then we can also include this code snippet here, at the top of our Gatsby config file to include the environment variables. So we're just going to quickly copy and paste that into this file. What this is going to do, it's going to use the .env package, and it's going to look for a new, it's going to look for an environment variables file that's been created at .env. Whatever the current node-env environment is. So by default, that's going to be development when you're running it locally. So from that, we can then go into our file system, and we can create a new file called .env.development. And this is where we can now add in any of our secure information. The last thing that you will want to do as well is, by default in the new project, the end files are not excluded by the gitignore file. So a couple of wildcards that you can do in that one is star is this essentially. If you do either of those, that should hide any .env files that you don't want to include. And then one last thing, this is more for if you are working on a project that you're sharing with other people. Something that I'll often do as well is I'll create an env.example file with a series of empty keys in there. So you can include an exclusion for that afterwards. And then in here, you'll be able to do .env.example. And any keys you include in there, I missed the dot there, sorry. Any keys you include in here now will actually be visible as long as it doesn't get populated with any actual credentials. It'll just give you a good starter for anybody who's coming to the project. So again, less important if this is a solo project, but it's definitely useful if you're collaborating with others on the project. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to go through and we're going to install the content source plugin. So whether you're doing this with npm or yarn, it's the same thing. You're going to want to install the @Kentico/Gatsby-source-content plugin. So we'll go through to the documentation again, and we'll go to the content source plugin documentation. So here we've gone to the
Rich, sorry,
can zoom in.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you.
Yep, thank you for that. This is why it's always good to have a second person on with you, because it just helps, because you never know what other people are saying. So we can see here is we've got the documentation page for this. So what I've done is I've gone to the open source Gatsby plugins and I've searched for Kentico. And on the left, you can see we've got the @Kentico Gatsby source content, which is the one that you want to use. So scroll down, grab the name of the package here. And then within this, we can just quickly, I'll make a new terminal window. We'll do yarn add, and then we'll drop in the package name and install that. Again, as long as the internet isn't too bad, that should be quite quick. There we go. So that's installed. And once we've done that, we then want to go back to the documentation, and we can see in here we also get asked to add a block of configuration to our Gatsby config file. So we can just copy and paste that in to the Gatsby config. So we'll scroll down to the bottom, drop that into the bottom there. And there's a couple of parameters in here that we need to fill in. So the project ID we'll get to shortly, and the language code names. So the language code names is not so much relevant in this particular workshop, but there is a workshop later on that is being run by Andre, who works at Kentico, and he will be going through localization. So I'm sure he will be touching on language code names and how to localize content. But for the purposes of this workshop, you can leave that as default, and it's absolutely fine. So the project ID, we need to get this from content. So what we want to do is we want to go in and go to the content website. So if you search for content.ai, this will bring up the content website. And on here, you can click on the For Developers button and then the Get Free Developer Plan button. And then you can go in and you can sign up for a new account. The developer plan is really, really good. It's completely free. You go to the pricing page and scroll down. You get 2 users, 2 environments, access to all the APIs and SDKs out of the box. So you don't have to worry about any feature lockout in terms of using the product. You can evaluate it, you can try it, and you can see if it's going to work for you without any financial commitment. So it's definitely worth giving a go with that one. So you can sign up for a free account. So this will probably take a few minutes. So I'll go through and I'll continue. But if you're able to sign up as you go along, that'd be good. So once you've registered and you've logged in, you'll get a projects page. Yours will most likely have one placeholder project in there. But what we'll want to do here is we'll click on the Create New Project button, which will pop up a pane on the right-hand side. And we can go in and we can enter the name of the project. And we can go in, you can choose a subscription that it's going to apply to, which will likely be pre-filled with your with the new new subscription that you've created by registering. Then you want to choose a data center. So I'm based in the UK, so the Netherlands is the closest to me. So you can choose whichever one's closest to you. And then you can also, there's the option to clone from an existing project. In our case, we don't need to worry about this. We're just creating a new empty project. So once you've done that, you can click Create Project. This will take just a few seconds, really. And you'll get a new entry in your dashboard. You can click on the Open Project button, and you'll go into the project itself. So from here, you can click on the project settings on the left-hand side, go down to API keys, and then within this interface, you've got all of the various API keys and IDs and things that you're going to need to work with content. So a quick summary of this, we've got the delivery API project ID. So this is what we want to use in our Gatsby configuration. We've got the preview API keys, which are used if you want to pull draft content from content. And then we have the management API, which we haven't got enabled right now. That's to do more with if you wanted to import and manipulate content through the management API itself. So it can be really useful if you're migrating content over from another project. You can also secure access to the API. If you by default the content would be publicly available through the API, as long as you had the right information, obviously. And then finally, the subscription API is available if you need that as well. But for us right now, we just want to use the project ID for the delivery API. So we can copy that. We can go back to our project, and we do not. The project ID is not necessarily a secret piece of information, but best practice-wise, we don't really want to paste that directly in there. What we want to do is go into our end file that we've created and set up a new environment variable in here. So we'll call this content project ID, and then we'll drop that in there. And now, in order to access our value here in the configuration file, we want to go process.env dot and then the name of the variable that we've entered. And that will allow us to pull through the environment variable from our file. And it also means when you deploy this into a production environment, you'll be able to set that environment variable wherever you need it, and you'll have that available. And you can change it per build environment if that makes sense for your particular project. We've got this covered off. We've got our plugin installed. Next thing that we're going to want to do is add some content types into our content project. So to do that, you want to click on the content model button on the left-hand side, just above project settings. You want to click on create new content type. And this will bring up the wizard in order to create a new content type. So we're just going to name this homepage for now. We're going to create a new content group. Let's call that general. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the different types of content fields we've got. So we've got text, which we'll use to create a new page title field. And then we're going to bring in a rich text field as well. And we're going to call that content.
Can we just zoom in this a little bit as well, please?
Yep. That's a bit better.
Thank you.
Cool. So within this interface, you can click on the cog icon here, and this will let you configure the fields a little bit further. So in the case of the page title, we just want to make that required. And again, in the case of the rich text field, we want to make this required. And we also want to disable text, tables, and images. We just want to leave components and items, and we'll get back to that shortly. So once you've done those changes, you want to click Save Changes at the top right, and that will save your new content type. And if you click on this icon at the top right, the little braces with a hash in the middle, you can click on that and you can see the code name as well. So if you ever want to refer to this content type in any code, that's the internal reference you would use. So the next thing that we want to do is just go into content and assets on the left-hand side, which will show us our content library. Create a new content item. Select our new content type from the dropdown. Click Create. At this point, we've got our editing form for the new content item we're creating. So we're just going to call this, again, I'll just call this homepage, very original. For the page title, we'll use Gatsby Conf 2022. Then in our content, you can see here, if I type anything, we're going to get a validation error because we've defined that we cannot use text, we're not allowed to use tables or images. And this is so that we can use the insert button to add either linked content or components. So we'll get to those shortly. For now, though, we're just going to go back to our content model. We're going to create a few more content types in here as well. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a component content type or a section content type. It depends entirely on what naming you want to use. In my work, we always call them widgets, which is a historical, probably more of a carryover from Kentico Experience, which is the .NET platform, but we've always called them widgets. So, but for this one, we're just going to say section. We're going to say section hyphen hero. We're going to create a new content group, call that general. We're going to drag in a text field and another text field. First one we're going to call title, and the second one we're going to call subtitle. And again, we can mark both of those as required. You could add any length limits as well, either words or characters as well if you require that. So we're just going to save that one. Then we're going to go back to our content model list, create a new one, and we're going to do section, and we're going to call this split content. So this is just fairly traditional 50-50 layout idea that you might get on a typical landing page. We'll call this general again. We'll drag in a title field. We'll call that, sorry, a text field. We'll call that title. We'll make that required. We'll drag in a rich text field. We'll make that required as well. And we'll call that content. We'll scroll down, and in this one, because this is content that's going to be within a layout, we don't really want people to add other widgets and other components in there. We probably don't want them to include images or tables either. We probably just want to keep to text-based content there. And within the text as well, you could also enable which specific text formatting options you want to include. So we can close that one down there. And then finally, we want to include an asset field. We'll just call that image. I've got the configuration for that. We'll make that one required. And then we'll make sure that they provide exactly one image for us. And then we'll save. So this is now going to give us a split content layout as well. So if we go back to content model now, you can see we've got a homepage content type and the two sections that we've just created. So if we go into the homepage content type, and if we go to the content field, configure that, expand our components and items field, you can see we can now limit this to exactly the types that we want people to be able to include in here. So we're just going to say section hero and section split content, and then we're going to save this again. So now that we've done that, we can go back to our homepage content item. We can go to our content field here. If we click on the plus and then click on insert new component, we'll have the option to either use a hero or a split content. So we can include a hero, create that. And this will give us essentially an embedded content item within the homepage itself. So in here, we can do welcome to Gatsby Conf 2022. Now we'll just add a nice little workshop is helpful subtitle there. And then we'll also add in another content type in here, another component, sorry. And we'll add in split content. And then we'll just include some example content in here. So I'll just grab some lorem ipsum as we do like that. I can find that window anyway. Let's just go and grab some lorem ipsum through here anyway. Shall we do that? So we'll just grab some boilerplate content there. Content field. We'll go into the title as well. And then we also want to include an image. So we'll just quickly go to something like Unsplash. We'll just grab an image. see. I'll download that, and then we can just drag that in, and it'll automatically upload it for us as well. And then the last thing we want to do here, if you expand out the right-hand panel here, click on change workflow step. Make sure publish is selected, and then click publish. And then now we've got our content item published as well. So the next thing we want to do is quickly go back into Gatsby. We want to quickly restart the process, relaunch Gatsby Develop. So this is going to go through and it's going to refresh the GraphQL schema. It's going to pull in the content that it now knows is there. And then we can go back to our graphical interface and take a look at that. Shouldn't take more than a couple of minutes. Aha. I think that's just a file permission error, which classic that you would only ever get that when you're doing a screen share. So hopefully that'll go through just fine this time. I'll run through this time. We are getting a lot of errors going through there for some reason. Okay. You have to love live coding, don't you? So we're just going to run yam clean. So this is going to cause Gatsby just to clean out the cache, just in case that file permission error caused it to get corrupted or something like that. So we'll just let that do its job, and then we'll just rerun that command, and hopefully it'll work this time. If not, worst case scenario, I'll jump over to a pre-prepared project and we can just run through that as well. Well, that seems to have gotten further than last time. Just waiting for the development bundle to build. Reload this. We should get that. Still thinking. There we go. So now on the left-hand side, you can see we've got a few new entries around content itself. So we've got content item homepage, section hero, and split content.
Yeah, so you get it. I think just zoom in on that one as well. That's quite tiny.
Yep. Cool. So you can see here we've got content item, hero, homepage, section hero, and split content. So, and you've also got the versions for all of the content as well. So in here, if we hop into content item homepage, we can go on and explore the content that we're pulling in here. So we can go on elements, we can go on page title, we can pull in the value of that, we can go on content, and we can pull in the value of that as well. Then you can see on the right here, this returns the data with the content that we've just entered into content itself. And then we also have a few extra things around rich text here as well, with images, links, and modular content. So for the sake of this, we just want to go through and we'll just enable all of this. So we've got all of the data there for when we need it. We'll go in modular content, and we'll just grab the ID of that, and then we'll go in for value as well. So you can see in here, we have two items under modular content, and these are the items that we added into the rich text editor just now. So if we grab this query and we go into our code, we can take a look at our source pages index page. And I'll quickly go through, and I'm just going to remove some of the boilerplate in here. We don't really need all these styles in there for the time being. I'm just going to strip out the content of the page as well. I'll just leave an empty main tag in there for now. What we're going to want to do in here is export a new GraphQL query. So at the bottom of the page, you're going to want to type export const query equals GraphQL, which will import from Gatsby. And this is a tags template, so we can include the backticks for a new template string. And we're just going to paste in our query and save that. And I also suggest as well, whenever you do any new queries in Gatsby, you just name the query appropriately. So we'll just call that homepage query. And that's just useful if you ever need to debug anything through the terminal or through any error logs. You'll get a slightly better error message pointing you with the right query then as well. So useful information there. Hopefully that'll save someone a headache in the future. I know it saved me a few in the past. So and once we've got that, if you go to the logs, it should have rebuilt. And if we go to our index page, in the props here, we can pull out data. And then we're just going to quickly, for the sake of showing that here, we'll just JSON stringify that. And for the time being, I don't think that's going to cause an error. It's just getting a linting error because I've not defined the type. And then again, if we go back to our page itself, at localhost 8000, see we're now outputting the data that we've got from content itself. So the next thing that you're going to want to do is include the rich text component. So for the sake of time, because this is only a 45-minute workshop and the process will take a little bit longer from this point onwards, I'm just going to switch over to a pre-prepared project and we'll just run through what's already in there just to save typing the code out. But hopefully it'll still be just as explanatory for everybody. But I just want to make sure we cover this detail off before we run out of time in the next 15 minutes. So this is a pre-prepared project that we've already got in here. And you can see in terms of the configuration, it's already the same. We've got the same options checked. We've added in our source plugin. So it's all the same in terms of the functionality there. And I'm just going to go through and quickly stop this running and just quickly do the same and restart on here. I'm just going to clean and restart with Gatsby. And the only real change on this one is that I've added there's some styling in there, some images, and we've also got the rich text component, which I'll run through. So while that's booting up, under components, you can see I've created a series of React components: hero, layout, rich text, and split content. Layout is just to give the page a little bit of something like an actual general page layout, but the important one we want to see here is rich text. So I'll just open up the index page briefly. And you can see in here when we're pulling the data out from what we saw earlier, we're passing in the page title value into our React helmet metadata there is the title value. And we're also passing in the content from our rich text field into this rich text component. So the rich text component itself, we'll scroll down in here. This includes the rich text element component, which is provided by Kontent. So another package that you can get on here is the Gatsby Content Components package. If we scroll down in here, past the image element component, you can see we've got the rich text element component. So what this lets you do is you can pass in all the data from our rich text field, and then you have a series of functions that you can use to resolve those to various React components. So it will pass you any images it finds, and you can return an optimized responsive image. It'll pass you any links it finds, so then you can resolve those links to any URLs that you need, either internal or external. So you can see in this example, we're using the Gatsby link component and creating the URL from the data that we have in this link object. And we also have resolved link items, which is not so much relevant for what we're covering today, but it allows you to create relationships between content. So you could bring in a reference to a blog post and perhaps include some sort of summary there. And then also resolve DOM node, which lets you include any replacements for things like tables or anything that you want to have a little bit more control over than just the vanilla output. And just as a comment as well, if there's any questions along the way, you can direct those into the Q&A box on the right hand side. We'll cover those at the end. The plugin, just to answer that question as it was asked, the plugin that actually outlines the import size and so on is called import cost. So it's definitely a useful plugin if you want to just keep an eye on you're not importing or over importing anything that you're using. So definitely use that one. Very, very useful. So again, we've got the rich text component there. So if we scroll down in here, the usage in here you can see is very, very similar. So we've got resolving our image to the image element, passing in the description if it's been provided in content. And we're also just defining that we want this to be a full width image. And then we're also resolving any links to a Gatsby link. This is just placeholder since we're not really using any right now. And then we've also got resolved linked items. So in here, this is going to give us the data for our hero banner or our split content component that we included in content as well. And what we're doing is a simple switch statement on the type that we have in content. So this would be section hero, section split content. And then we're returning the appropriate React component and passing in the data as props to those components. And then just as a fallback in this case, we're just going to output the data just in case we didn't recognize anything. In production, we'd probably want to do this as a console log in the background and just return nothing just in case. We don't want to include any anything on the front end that isn't necessarily going to make sense to the end user. So we probably would suggest only doing this in development mode. So you might want to do something like in here, do if process.env.nodeEnv equals development. And you might want to return that, otherwise turn null. So then in your development window, you can see the data that it hasn't recognized, but then in production, you're not going to worry about outputting that to the end user and confusing them with a bunch of JSON code, which they're not going to know anything about. So our two components here, hero and split content, they're just bog standard React components. We're just taking the content that we've been given and just returning a layout using, in my case, emotion components. And then we're just passing in an image element, title, and content in there as well. And since the value is HTML, we're just passing that in to the inner HTML of our content. And that's going to output the page there for us. So I'm just going to quickly go back over to localhost 3000 now that we're running a new one. You can see in here we've got the content that I've added in the content project here. So we're just going to switch over. This is the project that this particular pre-prepared project is running off of. So we've got the content section here, Hello Gatsby Conf 2022, and then the subtitle, and then we've got some content there and ready to go. And you can see that matches up in here with the content that we've pulled through on each side there. So I think with that, we've probably covered off the key points, really. You can see, aside from probably the hooking up of this rich text component, everything else should be fairly simple and fairly easy to get going with. But this pattern here, resolving linked items and passing in different React components, just gives people and editors the power to go through and create their own landing pages and create their own website pages without any developer involvement. So if they wanted to reorder the structure here, they could go in, create a new version of this, and they could drag and drop these around, publish that, and update the content themselves that way. Or you could go in and you could create a new additional component in here if they wanted to have another split content. Maybe you added the option for it to be a reverse layout. They could start building up their own landing pages, the home page, and so on with their own control. So if there's any questions, we probably want to get to those now. We've got just about 5 minutes left of the workshop.
Can't see anything in the chat that's not already been answered.
No problem. Hopefully I was thorough enough then. Matt, is there anything that's come to mind as we were going through that you think would be worth mentioning?
I think if memory serves correctly, and this is maybe a few years ago that I first signed up for my content account, you do also get a demo project when you get started up as well. So you can take a lot of what's been shown here by Rich, but have the content side like pre-filled in, so you can kind of go and look at some pre-existing content as well, which is quite a nice way to go exploring.
Definitely. Yeah, it's also great just with the interface of how simple it is to get going as well, and just create your own content types. So I just really encourage people to go in, just experiment with it, play around with it, and just see if it works for your projects. I mean, content itself is definitely targeted to a larger kind of more enterprise client, but the power and the control you have in here, we've not remotely touched on the various features that kind of reach that level. But if we go back to the slides here as well, I mean to click on that. If we just go through here, we've got another workshop being run by Andre later on for building advanced multilingual landing pages with Gatsby and Kontent, and you can see the times there just included for everybody, but that will go into a little bit more of a deep dive on some of the more complex and the more higher level use cases for content on the kind of larger scale projects where you're dealing with lots of different language content, and you really need to kind of dig into that. So I definitely suggest people would check that one out as well. Cool. So I think we're just coming up on time. So I guess with that, I'd probably just want to thank everybody for their time, and I hope the workshop was useful for everybody. I hope it gives you a good intro to content, a good intro to Gatsby if you're getting started with that as well. And I hope to return to this again at some point, and maybe do some more talks on Gatsby, some more workshops on Gatsby and content. And thanks for your time as well, Matt. Appreciate you coming along.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you, everybody.